You ever had a roommate with a weird rule? Not just a preference like, don't leave dirty dishes in the sink, but something completely bizarre? Because I did. And if I had listened, maybe things would be different. Renato and I moved into this old apartment building downtown. Cheap rent, decent space, nothing special. But on the very first night, he gave me one strict rule: never use the elevator. At first I laughed, thought he was messing with me. Maybe it was haunted, maybe it got stuck a lot. But Renato didn't laugh. His face was stone cold serious. "I mean it," he said, lowering his voice. "You take the stairs, every time." That's when I noticed it. The building had two elevators. One looked normal, the other was different. The metal doors were rusted, the buttons barely lit. There was a faded, out-of-order sign, but it looked like it had been there for decades. I should have asked more questions. I should have pushed him for answers, but I didn't. I figured, whatever. I'll take the stairs, for now. Weeks passed. I got used to the rule. 6 flights of stairs every day. Annoying, but manageable. Then came that one night. It was late. I'd just gotten home from work, exhausted. Renato wasn't home. The hallway was silent, and the elevator doors were open. I stopped. I knew better. I knew better. But the inside looked normal. Clean even. The lights on the panel were glowing softly. The buttons worked. My legs were sore. My body was heavy. Just this once. I stepped in. The doors slid shut. The descent was eerily smooth. Too smooth. No sounds of gears grinding, no faint hum of machinery, just an unnatural silence. Then the doors opened, and my heart stopped, because standing there in the dimly lit lobby was me. I wasn't looking in a mirror. I wasn't seeing a reflection. I was still inside the elevator, but I was also stepping out, and the other me was smiling. I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen inside the elevator, staring at myself. The other me, the one outside, looked exactly like me. Same clothes, same posture. But there was something off. The way he smiled, wide, too wide, like someone trying to mimic a human expression but getting it slightly wrong. He turned his head slowly, looking around the lobby. Then, without hesitation, he walked away. Calm, casual, like he belonged here. I couldn't breathe. My brain scrambled to find an explanation. A trick? A hallucination? A dream? The elevator doors started closing. I panicked. I couldn't let him leave. I lunged forward, slamming my hand against the doors, but they shut before I could step out. The button panel flickered, and then the elevator started going back up. I jabbed the buttons, pressed every single one. Nothing worked. The numbers on the display ticked upward, floor by floor, just like before. My stomach twisted. What the hell just happened? When the doors opened again, I stumbled out onto my floor. Everything looked normal. My hallway, my apartment door. I rushed inside and locked the door behind me. My chest heaved. I needed to wake Renato up. But the apartment was empty. But then I saw the photos. Renato had a few framed pictures on the shelf. I'd seen them 100 times before. Us at the bar, him with his family, some random snapshots from his last trip. Except now, I wasn't in any of them. In the photos where I should be standing, there was just empty space. My pulse thundered in my ears. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app. My hands shook as I switched to the front-facing camera. And for a second, just a fraction of a second, I wasn't there. I dropped the phone. My head spun. What the hell did I just see? A key rattled in the front door. I turned, pulse hammering. The knob twisted. Renato stepped inside, and his face immediately twisted in horror. He stumbled back, eyes wide, breathing heavy. "Who the hell are you?" My stomach dropped. I took a step forward, raising my hands. "Renato, it's me." My voice cracked. "What are you talking about?" But Renato took a step back, his face pale. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone. "Don't come any closer." I froze. Why was he looking at me like that? Like I was some kind of stranger? "It's me," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "We moved in together 3 months ago. You're the one who told me not to use the elevator, remember?" He shook his head. "I don't know you," he said. His voice was unsteady, like he was trying to convince himself. You don't live here." The words hit me like a slap. My head spun as I looked around the apartment, trying to find anything that proved I belonged here. My shoes by the door, my books on the shelf, the laptop on the desk with my stickers on it. But the longer I looked, the more things felt wrong. The shoes looked slightly different. The books weren't in the same order. The laptop was there, but the wallpaper wasn't mine. The realization crept over me like ice. This was my apartment, but it wasn't. Something had changed. Or worse, I had changed. Renato's breathing was uneven. He was gripping his phone like a lifeline, ready to call someone. I had to fix this. I had to get back. I bolted. Renato shouted something behind me, but I didn't stop. I ran straight for the stairwell, my heart pounding so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I had to get back to the elevator. I nearly tripped down the stairs in my rush. My mind was racing. What if it was gone? What if it didn't work anymore? What if I was stuck like this forever? When I reached the ground floor, I skidded to a stop. The elevator doors were closed. The rusted metal gleamed under the dim hallway light. For the first time, I noticed something. The out of order sign. The faded letters. They weren't faded anymore. The sign was new. I swallowed hard, stepping closer. My own reflection stared back at me in the metal doors. I looked normal, but I had seen myself in the apartment mirror. I hadn't been there. I pressed the button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. Harder. "Come on, please." The hallway was silent. Then, a soft ding. The door slid open, and I saw it. The other me, standing inside the elevator, smiling. He didn't look surprised, didn't look scared. If anything, he looked amused, like he had been waiting for me. "Going up?" he asked. His voice was mine, but there was something off about it. A slight echo, like two voices speaking at once. I took a shaky step forward. I didn't have a choice. I stepped inside. The doors closed. The elevator began to rise. I didn't touch any buttons. Neither did he. We stood in silence, facing forward side by side. I could feel his presence. Unnatural. Wrong. Like standing next to a reflection that wasn't just copying you, but thinking. Watching. "Why are you doing this?" My voice came out hoarse. He chuckled. A low, quiet sound. "I didn't do anything." He turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see the grin stretching his face. "You stepped in. You stepped out. That's how it works." The elevator dinged. The doors opened. I saw the hallway of my floor, but I hesitated. The other me stepped forward, stopped, turned. "You coming?" My pulse thundered in my ears. I looked down at my hands. They looked the same. But how could I be sure? I stepped out. The doors shut behind me. I stood there, breathless. Then I heard footsteps. Renato came running from the apartment, his face twisted in relief. "Dude, where the hell have you been?" My mouth went dry. I turned slowly. The hallway looked exactly the same. My apartment door was open. The shoes were where they should be. The photos on the shelf. I was in them. I exhaled shakily. "I got stuck," I said. "In the elevator." Renato's face darkened. "You used the elevator?" I nodded. His expression turned unreadable. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then he stepped closer, lowered his voice. "Are you sure you came back?" I froze, because I wasn't. I wasn't sure at all. And in the distance, down the hallway, I swore I heard the soft chime of an elevator dinging again. You ever had a roommate that just felt off? Not in a loud, aggressive way. Not in a way that made you call the cops. Just something about them was wrong. That's how I felt about Alex. I found him online when I was looking for a roommate. The rent was cheap, the place was decent, and he seemed normal enough. Quiet, clean, paid his share on time. But there was one thing about him that I couldn't ignore. Alex never slept. I don't mean he was an insomniac or stayed up late watching TV. He never slept. Every night when I'd go to bed, I'd hear him in the living room just sitting there in the dark. No phone, no TV, no music, just sitting. At first, I told myself it wasn't my problem. Some people have weird habits, right? But then I started waking up in the middle of the night feeling like someone was watching me. I'd peek out my bedroom door, and there he was, sitting on the couch, motionless, staring straight ahead. I tried to ignore it. I really did. But one night, curiosity got the best of me. "Hey man," I said, leaning against the doorway. "Don't you ever sleep?" Alex didn't even turn his head. He just murmured, "I prefer not to." I let out a nervous chuckle. "Yeah? Why's that?" This time he looked at me. His eyes were sharp, too alert for someone awake at this hour. "If you knew what happens when we sleep, you wouldn't either." That answer stuck with me. It didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like a warning. From that night on, I started locking my bedroom door. I didn't even know why. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe it was instinct. But something told me to be careful. Then, one evening, I came home early. Alex wasn't there, and for the first time, I had a chance to see what he did in his room. I pushed open his door. The air inside was cold, way colder than the rest of the apartment. My stomach clenched. There was something deeply, unnervingly wrong with that space. Then I saw them. Photos, dozens of them, all of people sleeping. Different people, different places. Some looked like they were taken through windows, others inside bedrooms. I felt sick just looking at them. And then, I saw a picture of myself. It was me, asleep in my bed. My room, my sheets, my pillow. The picture was taken from inside my room. I staggered back, my breath caught in my throat. That's when I heard the front door creak open. Alex was home. I barely had time to shut his door before I heard his footsteps in the hallway. My hands were shaking. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I rushed to the couch and grabbed my phone, pretending to scroll through it like nothing had happened. Alex walked in. His eyes landed on me immediately. "You're home early," he said. I forced a casual shrug. "Yeah, class got canceled." He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there studying me. "Did you go in my room?" His tone was calm, but something about it made my skin crawl. I had two choices, lie or admit it. If I lied, he might know. If I admitted it, I had no idea what he'd do. So I shook my head. "Nah, why?" Alex's gaze lingered for a moment too long. Then without another word, he walked past me and disappeared into his room. I heard the click of the lock. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. My body was tense, every muscle screaming for me to run. But run where? It was late. I had nowhere to go. That night I barely slept. I kept my door locked, my ears straining for any sound. Around 3 a.m., I heard something. Soft, almost imperceptible. Footsteps, moving slowly down the hallway, stopping outside my door. I held my breath. The doorknob twisted, not rattled, not yanked, just a slow, deliberate turn. It was locked. The twisting stopped. Silence. Then just as I was about to convince myself I imagined it, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A whisper, right outside my door. "You locked it this time." I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. I sat in bed, gripping my phone, my pulse pounding in my ears. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but what would I say? Hey, my roommate never sleeps, takes pictures of people in their beds, and whispers creepy things outside my door? Who would believe me? I watched the crack under my door, waiting for shadows to move. But nothing happened. The apartment was dead silent. At sunrise, I made up my mind. I needed to get out of there. I would pack my bags, make up an excuse, and leave. But first, I needed proof. I had to know what was really going on. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app. Tonight, I would set it up to record while I slept. If Alex was watching me, if he was coming into my room, I'd catch him in the act. I placed the phone on my desk, facing my bed, and hit record. Then, for the first time in days, I forced myself to sleep. I had no idea that when I woke up the next morning, I would see something that would haunt me forever. I woke up to the sound of my alarm, heart racing before I even remembered why. Then it hit me, the recording. I scrambled out of bed, snatching my phone off the desk. My fingers were shaking as I stopped the video and hit play. The footage showed me tossing and turning for the first couple of hours. Normal. But around 3 a.m., the air in the room seemed off. The shadows looked darker. The edges of the screen seemed blurry, like the camera itself was resisting the image. Then, movement. My bedroom door. It opened. Slowly, like someone was making sure it didn't make a sound. And there he was. Alex. He stepped into the room, moving so silently it was unnatural. He wasn't just looking at me. He was staring, unblinking. His face was blank, but his posture was tense, like he was holding something back. Then, in the video, I shifted in my sleep. Alex froze. For a moment, he didn't move at all. Then, as if he had sensed something, his head snapped up, looking directly at the camera. He knew. I watched in horror as he took a step closer to the camera, his face filling the screen. He reached out, his hand covering the lens. The video cut out. I dropped my phone like it had burned me. My breathing was ragged, my skin damp with sweat. He had been in my room. He had been watching me sleep. And worse, he knew I was onto him. I didn't waste another second. I grabbed my backpack and stuffed as much as I could inside. Clothes, wallet, keys, screw everything else. I needed to get out. I swung the door open and froze. Alex was standing right outside my room. I didn't even hear him coming. He tilted his head slightly, his eyes locked onto mine. "You're leaving?" he asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. I swallowed hard. Yeah, something came up. He didn't move, didn't blink. "That's a shame," he murmured. "I thought we were getting along." I forced a laugh. "Yeah, well, gotta go." I stepped around him, forcing my body to stay calm, my hands steady. He watched me the whole way, his eyes never leaving me. I reached the door, my fingers wrapped around the handle. That's when he said it. "You shouldn't have recorded me." Everything inside me screamed run, but I knew that if I bolted, he might grab me. I needed to be smart, I needed to act normal. So I turned slowly, forcing a smile. "What are you talking about?" Alex's expression didn't change. "Your phone. You set it up last night. You wanted to see what I do while you sleep." I felt my stomach drop. He had seen it. He had known the whole time. "Relax, man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It was just a joke, I was messing around. His lips curled into a slight smile. "No, you weren't." I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, heavy. Then, he took a step forward. That was it. That was my cue. I ripped the door open and sprinted down the hall, my legs moving faster than they ever had before. Behind me, I heard him laugh. Not a loud, crazy laugh, just a quiet chuckle, like he knew something I didn't. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I hit the stairwell, skipping steps, nearly falling in my desperation to get away. I burst through the lobby doors into the cold morning air, gasping. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might stop. I ran. I didn't stop until I was miles away. That was 6 months ago. I found a new place. I changed my number. I blocked him everywhere. But sometimes late at night when I'm about to fall asleep, I get this feeling, like someone is watching me. And when I check my phone, sometimes I find something waiting for me. A photo of me, asleep. I should have never opened that attic. I know that now. But back then, it seemed harmless. Just a sealed hatch in the hallway of our apartment. Nothing more than an old storage space, right? Leonardo, my roommate, barely cared. Dude, it's just an attic, probably full of dust and dead roaches. He was the rational one, the one who never let his imagination run wild. But me? I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why was it sealed shut? What was so bad that someone felt the need to lock it away forever? Then one night I heard something, a faint scraping sound, slow, deliberate, coming from above us. I told myself it was just the pipes. I was wrong. Curiosity won. It always does. We grabbed a crowbar, a flashlight, and a step stool. The attic hatch was covered in layers of thick, uneven paint, as if someone wanted to make sure it would never be opened again. I hesitated, feeling a weird pressure in my chest. But then Leonardo pried the wood apart with a sharp crack. The hatch fell open, and a stale wave of cold air rushed down, carrying a scent of old wood and something sour. Flashlight up, I peeked inside. The attic wasn't empty. It was a room, a child's room. Dusty toys, a rocking horse, a tiny wooden chair, all frozen in time, like someone had just stepped out and never returned. In the corner, a crib sat covered in cobwebs. And on the wall, childish handwriting scrawled in faded crayon. I was bad, so I stayed here. Leonardo laughed nervously. Okay, that's creepy as hell. I stepped inside, my feet sinking into decades of dust. The air felt thick, heavy, like I wasn't supposed to be there. The flashlight flickered. For a split second, I thought I saw something move in the corner of my vision. A shadow? A trick of the light? I shook it off and scanned the room. There was a tiny bookshelf filled with torn picture books, a few wooden blocks scattered across the floor. But what made my stomach churn was a doll sitting in the crib, its glass eyes staring straight ahead. And next to it, a diary. I picked it up, my fingers leaving streaks in the thick dust. The pages were yellowed and brittle, the handwriting shaky like a child's. I don't like the dark. Mommy said I have to stay here until I'm better. He comes at night. He talks to me. A chill ran down my spine. Leonardo exhaled sharply. We need to go. I nodded, stuffing the diary in my pocket. But as we turned to leave, the rocking horse moved, by itself. We slammed the attic shut and bolted out of the hallway. Neither of us spoke until we were back in the living room, our breathing ragged. Leonardo poured himself a drink. Nope, I'm done. Whatever that was, we leave it alone. I agreed. At least, that's what I told him. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the diary, about the child who lived up there, alone. Sometime past 3 a.m., I woke up. Something felt off. The air was colder than usual. My skin prickled. Then I heard it. A faint giggle. I froze. The sound wasn't coming from the attic, it was inside my room. Slowly, I turned my head toward the doorway. Small, dust-covered footprints led from my bed, back to the attic hatch. I couldn't breathe. The tiny footprints were unmistakable, pressed deep into the dust leading from my bedside back to the attic hatch. I sat up slowly, listening. The apartment was silent. Leonardo was asleep in the next room, oblivious. I should have run, should have left right then and there. But instead I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and followed the prints. Each step felt wrong. like I was walking towards something I wasn't meant to see. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I reached the hallway. The attic hatch was open, not just cracked, wide open. A cold draft seeped down, carrying a faint whisper. "Come play." A sharp breath caught in my throat. My skin prickled with something primal. This wasn't a dream. This was real. Then, from inside the attic, the rocking horse creaked forward and back. I ran. I don't even remember how I got back to my bed, but I forced myself under the covers, squeezing my eyes shut like a kid afraid of the dark. I told myself it would be gone by morning. It wasn't. At dawn, Leonardo found me sitting on the couch, wide-eyed, gripping my phone. "What the hell happened to you?" he muttered, rubbing his eyes. I pointed to the attic hatch. "It was open last night." He frowned. "You sleepwalk or something?" "No, Leo, I was awake. I swallowed hard. I heard a voice." His expression darkened, but he forced a chuckle. "Dude, you're just freaking yourself out." He glanced up at the hatch. "See? It's closed now." That was the problem. I didn't close it. Leonardo sighed, walking to the hallway. "Fine, if it makes you feel better, we'll seal it up." We nailed it shut, hammering the wood so tightly there was no way it would budge. But that night, the knocking started. A slow, deliberate tap. Tap. Tap against the attic door, from the inside. I lay frozen in my bed, heart hammering, ears straining against the silence that followed the tap. 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 It came from inside the attic, behind the nailed-shut hatch. Leonardo must have heard it too, because his door creaked open. "Dude, what was that?" His voice was groggy, but laced with unease. I sat up, swallowing dry. "The attic." The tapping came again. 3 slow knocks. This time a faint giggle followed, barely above a whisper. "Let me out." Leonardo's face lost all color. "Nope. No, hell no." I grabbed my phone, opened the camera, and turned on the flashlight. I wasn't about to open the damn thing, but I needed to see. We stepped into the hallway, staring at the hatch. Something was wrong. The nails we hammered in were still there, but the wood around them was splintering outward, as if something inside had been pushing against it. Then, scratch marks. Dozens of them. Tiny, frantic, carved into the wooden frame of the hatch. Leonardo cursed under his breath. "Dude, we have to leave. I don't care if we lose the deposit." I nodded. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone to call our landlord. I wasn't going to tell him we were being haunted by a ghost child, but I'd find an excuse. Maybe a gas leak. Mold. Anything to get out of here. Then, bang. The attic hatch shuddered violently. Leonardo and I stumbled back. The wood bulged outward, as if something was slamming against it from the inside. Then came the scraping. Fingernails. Dragging. Slow and deliberate. Across the wood. I backed away, barely breathing. Leonardo yanked my arm. "We're leaving. Now." I didn't argue. We grabbed our backpacks, wallets, and keys, not even bothering to pack anything else. But as I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A notification. I looked down. New photo saved to gallery. My stomach twisted. I didn't take any photos. With trembling hands, I opened my gallery. And there it was. A selfie. Not mine. A photo taken inside the attic. Of a little girl. Smiling. Standing right behind me. We ran. Didn't even lock the door behind us. Just bolted down the stairs, out into the cold night, gasping for air like we had just escaped a burning building. I didn't stop until we reached Leonardo's car. We flung ourselves inside, slammed the doors, and sat in shaking silence. "What the hell was that?" Leonardo's voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My fingers gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. That photo. I pulled it up again, my stomach churning. The girl was young, maybe 6 or 7. Her face pale, her dark eyes wide. The kind of expression that wasn't quite a smile, but not entirely human either. And her hand, it was resting on my shoulder. I nearly dropped the phone. My skin crawled. Leonardo saw it too. "Dude, tell me that's not real." "I didn't take it," I whispered. Silence. Then, his breath hitched. "Wait, look behind her." I squinted. The background was dark, shadowed, but I could still make out the crib, the rocking horse, the walls covered in old crayon scribbles. And then I saw it. A shape. Tall, unmoving, looming in the darkness. Not the girl. Something else. Something that had been in there with her. I slammed the phone face down on the dashboard, my entire body breaking into a cold sweat. Leonardo started the car. "We're never going back." I nodded, barely able to breathe. And we didn't. We moved out the next day, paid the landlord double just to break the lease, and never looked back. But some nights, I wake up at 3 a.m., and I hear it. Tap, tap, tap. Somewhere in the dark, waiting. I found the listing late at night, scrolling through endless ads for overpriced apartments. It was almost too good to be true. Cheap rent, utilities included, and a fully furnished room in a shared house. The landlord, Mr. Donovan, responded immediately, telling me I could move in the next day. When I arrived, the house looked old but well maintained. A little too quiet, maybe, but I wasn't going to be picky. Mr. Donovan was an older man, friendly but with a nervous energy, as if he was in a rush to finalize the agreement. "Your room's at the end of the hall," he said, handing me the key. "Your roommate Kevin keeps to himself. You probably won't see much of him." That sounded fine to me. I wasn't looking for a best friend, just a place to sleep. I first saw Kevin as I was bringing in my boxes. He stood in the hallway, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. He was tall, thin, with dark hair that hung over his eyes. "Hey, I started, but before I could finish, he gave me a stiff nod and disappeared into his room, shutting the door behind him. Strange, but some people were just introverted. I didn't think much of it. That night, as I lay in bed, I noticed how eerily quiet the house was. No traffic noise, no distant hum of neighbors, just silence. It didn't take long for me to notice Kevin's odd habits. He never left his room during the day. His door was always shut, no sounds coming from inside. But at night, things were different. I'd hear faint movements, slow, deliberate footsteps pacing the hallway. Sometimes the sound of drawers opening and closing. Once I thought I heard whispering, but when I strained to listen, it stopped. His side of the kitchen remained spotless, like it was never used. No dirty plates, no food in the fridge with his name on it. The only sign that he existed was the occasional sound of him moving at night. One morning, I found the fridge door slightly open. Inside, nothing seemed out of place, but something felt off. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was overthinking things. But every night the sounds returned, and Kevin never came out. I decided to make an effort. Living with someone who acted like a ghost wasn't exactly comforting, so one evening I knocked on Kevin's door. No answer. I knocked again, a little louder this time. "Hey man, just wanted to say hi. I feel like we haven't properly met." Silence. I pressed my ear against the door. For a second, I thought I heard something, breathing, a faint whisper, but it could have been my imagination. I stepped back, shaking my head. Maybe he was just socially awkward. Maybe he wore headphones all the time. But that night, as I lay in bed, something woke me up. Tap, tap, tap. My eyes snapped open. The sound was coming from my window. I held my breath, my heart pounding. Slowly, I turned my head. Nothing, just darkness outside. But the feeling in my gut told me that something was wrong. I forced myself to go back to sleep, telling myself it was just the wind. but deep down I knew something wasn't right. The next day I casually mentioned Kevin to Mr. Donovan when I saw him outside. He froze. "What did you say?" "My roommate, Kevin. You told me he lives here." Mr. Donovan's expression darkened. "No, son. That room has been locked for months." I laughed, waiting for the punchline, but his face stayed serious. "No one lives there," he repeated. "Are you feeling all right?" I felt a chill run down my spine. I've talked to him," I insisted. "I've heard him moving around." Mr. Donovan sighed and pulled a key from his pocket. "Come with me." I followed him inside, my stomach twisting in knots. He stopped in front of Kevin's door, inserted the key and pushed it open. Dust. The entire room was covered in a thick layer of dust. The bed was perfectly made. No clothes, no personal belongings, no sign of life. I felt dizzy. Kevin had never been here. Then who had I been hearing? I stumbled backward, gripping the door frame as my mind raced. "No, that's not possible," I muttered. "I've talked to him. I've heard him walking around at night." Mr. Donovan gave me a long, concerned look. "Are you sure you're feeling okay?" I didn't answer. My mouth had gone dry. I rushed back to my room, slamming the door shut. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I needed proof, something to prove I wasn't losing my mind. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my messages. I had texted Kevin once just a simple, "Hey man, do you need anything from the store?" The message was gone. Not just unanswered, erased, like it had never existed. A cold dread washed over me. That night I stayed awake, sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at Kevin's door. I needed to see him, to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining things. At exactly 3 a.m. I heard it. A slow, creaking sound. Kevin's door was opening. My breath caught in my throat. The door was opening just an inch, but the darkness inside seemed endless. Then I saw it, a shadow moving inside the room, slow, deliberate. But that room was empty. I had seen it myself. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling, and turned on the flashlight. The second the light hit the doorway, the door slammed shut. I jolted back, my pulse hammering. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my body was frozen in place. Then, my bedroom door creaked behind me. Slowly, as if someone was already inside my room. I spun around, shining my flashlight wildly. Nothing. I was alone. But the feeling in the air, I knew I was being watched. I ran to my desk, grabbing the one thing that made sense, my journal. I needed to write this down to keep track of what was happening. But as I flipped through the pages, my stomach dropped. There was already a note there, in my handwriting. But I didn't remember writing it. "You already forgot me once, don't do it again." I dropped the journal. My reflection in the mirror behind me didn't move. I couldn't breathe. My own reflection stared back at me, unblinking. I turned my head slightly. The reflection didn't move. A cold wave of terror crashed over me. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be happening. Then, the reflection smiled. Not a normal smile, too wide, too wrong. I stumbled backward, knocking over my chair. My journal lay open on the desk, the words still staring at me. "You already forgot me once. Don't do it again." A memory surfaced, faint, blurry, like a dream slipping away the moment you wake up. I had lived here before. I had known Kevin before, and I had forgotten him before. The pieces didn't fit, but something deep inside me whispered that I had done this to myself, that I had erased him. But he hadn't left. He had been waiting. The lights flickered. The air in the room turned ice cold. Then, footsteps. Behind me. Slow. Careful. I couldn't turn around. I felt a breath against my ear. A voice, familiar and wrong at the same time, whispered, "Now do you remember?" I closed my eyes, shaking, unable to move. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The air shifted. The cold vanished. When I finally opened my eyes, I was alone. The mirror was normal. My reflection was mine again. But I knew the truth now. Kevin had never been real. But whatever I had erased and was still here. And it would never let me forget again.